About a year and a half ago, I was made redundant. I opted to treat that as early retirement because I had been hoping to retire within 2 or 3 years anyway. The reason I was wanting to retire early was that I was no longer really enjoying my job because the interesting parts, the bits I was really good at, kept being taken away from me. My job title was Learning Technology Developer, which basically means I was a programmer who developed learning technology applications. At the time that I was made redundant, we hadn't realized how much AI was going to change the whole process of software development, and the reasons for my redundancy had absolutely nothing to do with AI. Uh, it was just caused by policy changes, which meant my job was effectively vanishing. However, looking back, I think the changes that AI is beginning to make could actually make jobs like mine an awful lot more secure because it dramatically changes the pattern of risk. Using modern AI tools can help productivity for programmers, especially when you're writing something that isn't especially novel, but just a variation on a well-established theme. Learning technology tends to be fairly straightforward applications, so it's an excellent candidate for making use of AI to speed the development process. When you're typing code into a modern AI-enabled editor, the AI engine in the background is constantly guessing what you're going to type next and flashing up its suggestions. And as long as you are using fairly sensible function names, it gets it right a surprising amount of the time. And when it's not right, it's often close and it saves you time editing because you just have to make a few tiny corrections in the 5 or 6 lines of magically appearing code rather than type out 5 or 6 lines yourself. However, there's also another aspect of using AI for coding which is possibly even more useful. And certainly, when it comes to a job like mine, and security of these jobs much more significant. AI can solve the problem of poor documentation. AI tools can generate example code from poorly documented libraries, and it can look at an existing program and show the programmer how to add new features. Making use of AI for software development changes costs and risks enormously. The huge risk of having a single developer who could easily get hit by a bus, the so-called bus count of 1, is largely gone. Individual developers are also much more productive and can get up to speed on a project much more quickly. However, that's at the university side, the consumer creating their own learning technology. For suppliers or third parties, the changes are not really so significant. In the field of learning technology, for suppliers, development costs are actually just a tiny fraction of their total costs. Their marketing and support teams will be much larger than the development team. Their management team is probably larger than the development team and much better paid. And many of these companies also have enormous levels of debt to venture capitalists, which need to be repaid. When they sell software to universities, the university will provide its own first-line support. So the easy support, which could be replaced with AI, is not part of their costs. AI maybe can help marketing a bit, but I doubt it because the personal touch is really important. Looking at my situation, it was never actually really explained to me why projects were taken away and replaced with inferior commercial offerings, but I'm fairly certain that the main factor was risk. I've looked at the costs of some of these products, and if my former employer is paying list price, which admittedly I do not know, they've actually increased their own costs by getting rid of me. But AI has changed the balance of risk. there is now a much higher risk of that supplier going bust. And the risk of having an in-house product is vanishing. In software engineering, AI is a disruptor, but it is not necessarily going to cause the disruption quite the way the big companies marketing AI expected. It may actually start to erode their market by making bespoke software much more appealing. And programmers will find there are more programs to be written, so the number of jobs may well stay much the same. Entry-level programmers will probably have to change the focus of their skills, learn to do editing, work with AI, and correct its mistakes rather than writing everything from scratch. And the universities and colleges that train them will have to adapt their courses to suit this new world, of course. That will be interesting, but a far from insurmountable challenge, and sadly I'm not going to be part of it. My redundancy happened sufficiently close to retirement age that I won't be looking for another university job. Instead, I'll just play with AI at home and maybe make some YouTube videos about it if I can find some good uses. There was a tweet a while ago that gained a bit of traction. Here, you see it from the author whose name I won't try and pronounce. And she pointed out that what most of us really want is AI doing the boring things in our lives, the boring routine jobs, and letting us concentrate on doing interesting things. To some extent, in programming, I think this is working. AI is quite good at boring boilerplate code, and is good at going and looking up the reference manual. It's not very good at doing larger pieces of code, and in my experience has a complete block if you ask it to do something remotely original. What AI might end up doing is creating a lot of new programmer jobs, as programmers will need to be hired to fix all the terrible code being created by AI under the control of people who don't really know what they're doing. In other fields, the impact of generative AI seems to be more clearly negative than in programming, but maybe good uses will be found. Or maybe I just don't know enough about it and the good uses have already been found. One specific area where, maybe less seriously, I think AI could be very beneficial, whilst also reducing jobs, is in middle management. I suspect AI tools will be much better at focusing on the long-term interests of the organisation they work for, rather than putting their own personal short-term interests first, which, in my experience, is what middle managers usually do. Generative AI is here to stay, whether we like it or not. I suspect a lot of the current companies will soon shrink or even vanish, and most of the current planned data centers will never be built. But the underlying technology will continue, and it maybe will improve a bit, although I think the Pareto principle has already kicked in, and improvements will be small and slow until there's a whole new paradigm. For now, it's something we can't ignore, and maybe finding the good uses is going to be an interesting project.